Perfectionism is a trauma response. So, a lot of times we see that perfectionism is a trait that's developed in individuals that have had some type of trauma in their lives. Note that around like 60% of individuals have experienced trauma in their lives. So, this isn't just talking about like the classic traumas that people typically think about, but even like being raised in an invalidating home environment is often like a trauma situation. So what happens is that we're typically kind of conditioned to want to create the perfect scenario for us to do something. Otherwise, we think something bad is going to happen. And this is essentially perfectionism. Like, we need to do it exactly right. Otherwise, I am not safe. So there's probably some element where you pick this up either in your childhood, maybe in school, maybe culturally. And that's essentially the mindset behind a perfectionist. There actually is like negative perfectionism and positive perfectionism. I think that's how it's called. But essentially in the literature, they talk about that some perfectionists are essentially trying to avoid failure. And that's the type of perfectionism that is really the most detrimental. While other perfectionists, they're trying to essentially like optimize the self. So they're trying to like create as much achievement as possible to essentially like create this almost like perfect self. And that's considered more of a positive perfectionism because it's like you're trying to optimize gain versus avoiding failure. And so I think when it comes to dealing with perfectionism, it's really important to know what type of perfectionist you are. And so the negative perfectionism, and sorry that it's called negative, but that's how they call it, is that like, why are you so afraid of failure? Like, why is it so incredibly dangerous to you? Do you think that you wouldn't be able to recover from it? Are you incredibly sensitive to the opinions of others? Like, what's going on there? When it comes to like a positive perfectionism, why do you always need to improve yourself? Why do you always need to do better? Why do you always have to do more? What do you think is going to be achieved once you kind of reach that perfect state? And I think that's really interesting because oftentimes when people actually achieve that perfect state, they tend to raise the bar. That's the nature of perfectionism. It's like the constant raising of the bar. And it's like, a lot of times what happens with perfectionists is that they typically have an unstable sense of self. So what I mean by that is that essentially they don't believe that they're good enough. They don't value themselves. It's almost like they're blind to their positive attributes and they only see their negative attributes. And this is the root cause of a lot of issues in psychology, kind of this I call it like an unstable sense of self, an underdeveloped sense of self, in which you are always constantly striving in the outside world to do something in order to kind of fill that hole. And it's the kind of internal work that would actually fill that hole. And so a lot of times it's changing kind of mindset and automatic thoughts around the self. And so a lot of times, like when I work with clients who have high perfectionistic tendencies and I ask them like, well, what have you done well this week? Or what do you like about yourself? To them, they're like, wow. They like feel really confused. Like, I've never even thought about that. Because you're always kind of looking for like what's not going well. Where is my lack? Where are my gaps? And I mean, I do feel like we're kind of trained to do that as a society, but that's creating a bit of like that sense of self that doesn't feel whole. And changing the way you talk in your own mind, your relationship with yourself, how you view yourself is actually going to create like a lasting change in your perfectionism. Like that's what's actually going to improve it. And that's really the root cause. You need to create a highly like healthy sense of self, and then you won't be engaging in these types of behaviors where you're trying to prove to yourself or to others that you're good enough by being so perfect. And so a lot of that is looking in like your own kind of patterns in your mind. A lot of times perfectionists have like like progress blindness, where it's like they never really see their own progress. They have like achievement blindness, where it's like if they achieve something, maybe they see it for like a minute and then they're like on to the next thing. They just don't see their own value. And what will often happen as well is that perfectionists will argue with me that like, oh, but if I start looking at my own value, I'm going to become arrogant and I'm going to become a narcissist. Well, no, that's actually not the case, because usually those types of things are defensive. So developing a healthy sense of self will not make you a narcissist, because actually narcissists don't have healthy sense of self. That's why they're narcissists. And so that's kind of the psychological defense system right there at play, trying to prevent you from doing something new. And so what happens with this is that you need to really move to like validating yourself, seeing your own progress, seeing your own value, seeing like all the skills you have, and like really like developing that healthy sense of self, that relationship with yourself. And then that kind of desire for things to be so perfect should decrease, because you won't need it as much, because you'll have kind of a more stable sense of self.